Physics First teachers. How are you all doing today? Hopefully pretty good. I wanted to make a short video that captures all the updates that I've been doing to the curriculum maps over summer. So that way you guys can get caught up to speed quickly without doing a full retraining of the whole resource. So what I'm going to be showing you guys today is just real briefly what I've done to the scope and sequence and our curriculum maps, show you where some things are. I still have some work to do to complete it for Physics First, but your first quarter is complete. So I'll show you guys that. And then while the school year gets going, I'll keep working to complete the rest of those. So as we come down, this is actually the CIPD hub. And I have a page here that has the curriculum maps, scope and sequences. You can also go through the teacher's lounge. I'll show you in a little bit where the link to access this page is at. So you can go and find this page if you want, because I do add a few other things like pictures from around the district, our goal, some video updates. So just if you haven't been to this page before, I'll show you how to get there. All right, click on the 9th grade. That's our Physics First page, and that should take you to the scope and sequence. First thing you'll notice, if you haven't seen the updates over summer, it's got a lot more color. It's mainly cosmetic, but that also will tie in each quarter curriculum map. When you open those up, will match the same color that you see here. So quarter one will all be themed green. You jump into quarter two, it's all orange, blue, yellow. So I think that's going to kind of help you kind of shift gears as you go from one unit to the next. If you've never used it before, this is my one pager scope and sequence. So basically you print it out, you can see everything. It is a small font. So like some of the font is size 10. You can probably get some size 9s in there as well to make it all fit. So if you want something that's a little bit larger, just click twice on that image at the top. And this is my front back version. This is more useful if you're printing something out and you need to see it just a little bit better. So you would have your first semester on page 1, second semester on page 2. So we are looking at some of the updates. The main update to Physics First is I met with some physics teachers over summer, and we kind of looked at this flow and all the different chapters. What we identified was chapters that don't really fit and aren't as important, and we kind of cut those. So as you'll go through, you'll notice, I think chapter 6 just got removed entirely. Some of the chapters we got rid of a concept because, or what do they call those? Chapter section. We would get rid of a section. So we actually cut out some of the material. So that way, one, that's not as useful for students and addressing the standards, but now there's less stuff for us to cover as we work through. Hopefully, because I think last year, a lot of us were behind on the pacing. So hopefully the removal of content will help teachers to progress at a good pace. So we'll see how that goes this year. We left in chapter 1. Chapter 1 doesn't really address the standards, but it has a lot of essential vocab that's needed as you continue on. So feel free to be a little bit more picky and choosy as you go through chapter 1 and not feel like you have to do everything, but be looking for those key terms that describe motion and speed that you'll be using as you get into forces. Most of our standards deal with forces and momentum, but there's some vocabulary and concepts that you want to address early on to pull all the way through. So keep that in mind, but you don't have to sit and spend multiple weeks going through the first chapter. One thing I've updated down here, I think I used to have the lab investigation. So yeah, I used to just have, if you wanted to see what all the labs were in chapter 7, you could go do that. I've now switched this to different chapter reviews. You have access to this via the book, as well as the digital books that I'll show you where those are at if you haven't seen those. But I've just pulled out the pages that are the chapter reviews, just so that way it's easier to find some good questions over different sections, different vocab, different graphs. So it's got a lot of question types that you could be using as you do nows, exit tickets. I'll also try to be pulling a few more questions from here to increase the quality of some of our questions for our quarter assessments. Let me get back to here. And now that we've simplified the curriculum a little bit, I think last year it was like 6 or 7 different units. I've simplified that down, and now we just have 4 units, so it matches up with the quarters. And hopefully that all lines up and the pacing works out. So we'll see how that goes this year, and then we can kind of convene again to make any other improvements. But I think that what we came to as a group of teachers was really good. We do have, throughout the year, if physics teachers want to collaborate and make any adjustments, you'll just have to talk that through, and then we can make those. I think that's everything for the scope and sequence. So let's go ahead and dive into our curriculum maps. And like I said, quarter 2, 3, and 4, I haven't gone through and re-updated them since all the adjustments. So I will have to do that, but quarter 1 is completely set, so you don't have to worry about that. I think the only thing that's left for me to do is to update the quarter 1 assessment with changing some of the questions, make sure that it's more relevant to the adjustments. And I'll try and get that done for you guys shortly. All right, so what we're looking at is I did keep some of the same things for the first unit because it starts with motion and then you end with momentum. So kind of the introductory anchoring phenomenon is the same idea about the, I forget where they're at, but they're the rocks out in this desert that you see this trail of where the rocks moved, but there's no evidence of how they moved. There's no like tire tracks, like people were pulling them with cars. So there's kind of been a long-standing mystery for like what is moving these rocks. And you can start to talk about motion with students. It requires forces for things to move. You can talk about speed or collisions and all these things so students can be introduced to the ideas, but you don't have to answer how they moved. It can just kind of be that thing that students are like, okay, what's moving these objects? They can't just move on their own. And then after you've learned all the things, they go, well, it needs a force. So what's applying the force? And there's some videos out there that you can show them where they actually discovered what it was that was moving those. Really cool. So to tie that all together, and as you keep teaching to help students remember what it is that they're learning about, you do have your unit project poster. And so this will tie in the idea of the moving rocks. So that way, as you keep teaching through all your different topics, the students remember, that's right, we're learning all this to try to answer the question for how this occurred. So that way, at the end, you finish your unit. Hey, how can we answer this better? How can we answer this better now with the language and learning that you've done in this unit? You could do that, and then you also have, as another option, a good project to end your unit. Since your unit is going to end with collisions and momentum and that sort of thing, forces, you could do an egg drop challenge where students have to build some sort of capsule or way to enclose the egg that will save it from high drops. There's a lot of good ways to do this. I would do one where you limit what they're allowed to make it out of. A good idea is your design has to fit in a shoebox, essentially. So that way they just don't put a million balloons around it. And it's like, of course that's going to survive as long as it's secured in there. So you can put in limiting criteria to kind of challenge them, but they can use their ideas of momentum and forces to try to build a better egg carrier. Everything else is pretty much the same for you guys. I have updated all the links here. So this is what I was talking about. This will take you to the hub, my curriculum hub. If you ever need to access where all the resources are, that's through ThinkLink. I've pulled everything off of there, including now we have the book here on our curriculum map. So there's really nothing that you need there, but just in case, there's how you get there. We're going to be getting study.com this year. I haven't had the time this summer to mess around with it to see how it blends in with our stuff, but there'll be some good uses there. And I think that's everything for the curriculum landing page, but just know that you can use resources here for planning out your year. If physics isn't your strong suit, I've typed up some teacher background knowledge that hopefully will help you get caught up with what you'll be teaching for each chapter. Okay, So moving on down, we have our chapters. And if you click on the chapter titles, this is where I've hidden the link that goes to the actual book. So if you open up this is chapter 1 in the book. You can share this link with students, so students have access to the book if you're doing something with some of the pages. You guys should have some of the books there at your schools, but just in case, you have those digitally as well. One update that I will probably add to this, because I've been doing it in all my other content areas, is I've started to number the objectives and then assigning those numbers down to where they fit in the different chapter sections. So that way it's a little bit more clear for you guys what objectives go where. When you're lesson planning, you know how they fit in. So that'll be an update I'll try to do at some point this year. Coming down, some of these updates were added in midway last year, but some are new, so I want to showcase those. Over here on the left, you do have video resources. These are YouTube videos from highly viewed or reputable channels that tie in different discussion points to whatever is being talked about that week. These can be useful for you as a teacher if you need to learn something about the topic. If you want to play a section of the video in class so students can kind of see a representation of an idea. You could use Edpuzzle, where it would pause at certain points and ask questions. If you've assigned homework online on Canvas, and you can link one of these videos so students have a resource if they forget and have questions, they can watch that and hopefully that answers some of their questions. So feel free to be creative with these however you want. Some of them are short, you could just play it in class. But those will hopefully be useful not only for you, but for your students in their learning. Partway through last year, I started filming actually all the lab videos for all the investigations that go with CPO. I still have those videos. You don't see it how I've had it linked before, kind of like this. I've hidden the links in the icons here, and let's talk about the icons first. So if you have a hands-on lab, I've used the test tube to kind of signify, hey, this lab requires some materials. Make sure that you look ahead of time to prepare. And then if I put in the digital laptop, that means, hey, this is a virtual lab, so your students will need their devices. Just kind of a quick way for you to identify what type of labs are coming up. But then for each lab investigation, I've created a video where I show you the equipment, what needs to be done, how to set it up. So if you're new to the equipment, I do have videos for you as the teacher. If you just click on this icon, that'll take you to that video where I walk through for you how to utilize that equipment for the lab. And I made a little note of that here, just so that you know. Anytime that you are using any new equipment with the CPO stuff, I have additional videos. So the first lab uses the data collector. And so this video is just me showing you the data collector. And that's the little digital device that's used for a lot of labs. So, or if you're using the tracks for the cars, there's a video for that. So there's plenty of resources if you're new to the equipment that you can use to help you out. I'll come down to a different section to show you that I've got gizmos are now embedded into our curriculum. So you don't have to go to gizmos to go find different labs. I actually have them tied in with the right topics that go with it. So if you're learning about distance and time graphs, here's a gizmo that goes over distance and time graphs. I do have separate videos that cover how to use the gizmos if you need some help on that. I also have integrated as well is PhET simulations. Those are similar to Gizmos, where it's an online simulation. Gizmos just has a better student worksheet than what PhET does. PhET just kind of has, here's what other people have created. Feel free to choose what you want. They both have their benefits. PhET is really focused on the physics, so they have a lot of physics simulations. So you guys can utilize those. And there's some really good ones. The Energy Skate Park from PhET is one of my favorites. Okay. This column I've reserved as a space for once I have time to learn study.com and how we can use it in our classes. This is just for our high schools, but hopefully that there'll be some really good resources for us there. So hopefully I get around to that. I've got a lot on my plate, but we'll add that in as a way for some additional resources for students. All right, and then once we're over here, this is where actually all the CPO Physics First materials are. And because I had some stuff here before, it's been shifted. So the pretest for each chapter is just like 5 questions. You can do this and just like kind of gauge what students know, or you can reassign this at the end so you can see growth, or pull some of the questions as do nows. And if you need the answers, anytime you guys see this icon here, the little paper, that's your answer key. So there you go. So there's the pretest that you would give to students. There's the answers for you as the teacher. Within each section, here's the organization that I've done with these is I give you my suggested progression, meaning, hey, here are the things that I recommend you would use if you're teaching through this. So I've got, here's you would do the presentation. A lot of the presentations have a graphic organizer that goes along with it that you can use. And then inside the presentations are different images that maybe you want to print off. So they have these, they call them visual aids. So I've had those directly linked in case you want to have those printed, put up on a wall as a poster. They're there for you as you see its need. And then so I'll also include any labs and worksheets that I think are useful. Then I'll have a section that's like additional assignments, and I'll put things that are within the resource, you have access to them, but I don't think are necessarily going to be helpful. Most of the time, I put the guided reading down in the additional assignments. I don't find this as a useful resource for when you are in the classroom. You don't need to send your students to the book when you're there as a teacher. You could incorporate this if you're doing stations or as a assignment for when you're gone and there's a sub. You could have the guided reading as the assignment so students can self-learn and even pair it up with a video. So there are some uses for guided reading. What I just don't want to do is to tell teachers, hey, while you're in the room, just tell your kids, open up the book, you sit down, and they just do the work. Like, that's not what teaching should be. So I put it there. All of the actual materials, so it's like, well, where do I find this? Where do I find these? Is back up here where it says 1.1 resources. That's your Google Drive folder, and it has all the resources labeled for you. So as you can see, there's my presentation, there's my investigation, my guided reading. Most of them, some of them have answers too. So you have your answers, your graphic organizer, and the answers for you as well, and all that. So hopefully that kind of helps you figure out, okay, all my resources for that one section are in a folder right there, and that'll make it easy to find all your stuff. And then once you're into section 2, there's all the resources for there. You'll notice this one has a lot more in the additional assignments. They had a lot of worksheets over different lab safety, scientific process. These can actually be useful. I just didn't put them as like the core learning for distance, time, and measurement. So just because I put it down here doesn't mean you can't use it. It's just what I haven't put as like what I would have used. So it's very subjective. Feel free to utilize whatever you want. When you come down to the bottom, you finished all of this. You'll notice all of your worksheets, where you find the answers for those. This actually has all the answers to all of your worksheets. So that's at the bottom of each chapter. So that way you have answers if you utilize any of the questions from the worksheets. That's where that is linked. And then for students to be assessed, we have a few things. You have the chapter 1 review. I showed this on the scope and sequence. Remember down at the bottom, this is here as well. Great spot to do a vocabulary review is what they start with. They have different question types. So feel free to either give that to students or you could pull questions off from there. And then each chapter has 2 different tests. Test A is just straight multiple choice questions. And test B has a different variety of questions. I think they start off with true, false. They do some fill in the blank. So test B has some different question types. And then your answer keys for both of those. Again, if you see that picture of a little worksheet, you just click on it and there's my answers. So that's very nice. The reason that the answer keys for these look so weird is they're actually designed so that if you line it up with the actual test, the answers are showing up right next to where, so you can kind of have the answer key overlaid. and you can see exactly where your answer should be. So sometimes they have weird formatting, but it helps you easily identify where all the answers are quickly. Okay, so that's pretty much it. You just do the same thing for each chapter. And like I said, chapter 1, you might pull some of the stuff, but try to move through that pretty quickly to get to the actual stuff about motion, forces, acceleration, and those sorts of stuff, because that's where the actual standards are located at. And then once you get down to the bottom, and this is an example of where chapter 4, we just split apart and moved most of chapter 4 into quarter 2. But that first part of it is here. So that one's kind of broken into 2. And chapter 6, I've crossed out. It's no longer going to be used. But just in case, I left all the stuff here. So that way, if there was something in there that you wanted to use, you could go in and pull that resource. So I've left it there for you. But notice if I've crossed it out, that means you don't need to teach that. And I put a little note there to think about that. But once you get down to the end, don't forget about the unit assessments. So I put that down the bottom to remind you to go back to that guiding phenomena or do the unit project to kind of summarize that unit learning. So that's basically it. Hopefully all these additional resources will help you with your planning, at least in utilizing all the CPO stuff effectively and quickly. I'm always happy if you guys create your own stuff or pull stuff from elsewhere, so long as we're starting here and pulling what we find is good and moving forward. There's a few updates I still want to make to this to enhance some of the resources, but for the time being, I think this is pretty good. And to keep this from going too long, I'll end it there. And I look forward to working with you guys this year. If you have questions, want to co-plan, have me come in and help with the lesson, please let me know. Always happy to help. And I'll see you guys in another video. Bye.